No one expected what this young boy did when a homeless man was humiliated and ordered out in front of all the patrons of a luxury restaurant. The boy stood up for the man, and when the truth about the homeless man was revealed, he got a life-changing reward, leaving the entire restaurant in shock. Before we begin, if you believe kindness should always win, hit that like button. Let's spread positivity together. It was a bright afternoon in Sydney, Australia, and the upscale luxury restaurant on a busy corner was filled with professionals, socialites, and tourists as usual. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the streets of Sydney, making the glass-paneled windows of the luxury restaurant shimmer. On this day, Chris Hemsworth decided to pull up at the luxury restaurant, though not in his usual grand style. Little did he know that the head waitress, Jenna, would insult the hell out of him and cause him to be ordered out. But the unexpected turn of events that followed would leave you utterly speechless. Jenna, the head waitress, was known for her charming smile and perfect manners. Her blonde hair is always neatly tied back, her uniform crisp and spotless. She was the restaurant's shining star, at least that's how it seemed. Just like a blade with two edges, there was another side to Jenna. To the wealthy customers who came in wearing designer clothes, she was all smiles and polite, her voice dripping with charm. She fawned over their every need, laughed at their jokes, and treated them like royalty. But to those who seemed less fortunate, the ones who looked out of place or couldn't afford the expensive menu, her mask slipped. She would become cold, dismissive, and cruel. She would roll her eyes, sigh loudly, and make sure they felt unwelcome. The other staff noticed it too, the way her smile vanished the moment she spotted someone who didn't fit her standards. It was like a switch flipped, and on this particular day, that switch flipped harder than ever. Amidst the busy scene of the luxury restaurant, the energy shifted, and the shift was immediate. A subtle but noticeable pause in movements. The waiters, who had been gliding effortlessly between tables, hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Customers, previously lost in their meals and conversations, glanced toward the entrance. The automatic glass doors slid open smoothly, inviting fresh air into the bustling interior. A homeless man entered. The contrast was striking as he stepped into this new environment. The poor man stood there, hesitant, as if second-guessing his decision. His clothes were faded, wrinkled, and dusted with the marks of hard times. His hoodie, once black, had turned a dull gray. His jeans were frayed at the ends, and his sneakers were scuffed beyond recognition. And his face held the unmistakable weight of exhaustion and hunger. But what stood out the most was the way he carried himself, carefully, almost apologetically, as if afraid of disturbing the pristine atmosphere around him. The luxury restaurant no longer buzzed with laughter. Now, there was a different energy, the kind that settles in a room when something or someone doesn't belong. Some customers stole quick, judgmental glances before returning to their meals, while others openly stared, their eyes scanning him from head to toe. It was as if, in that moment, he had become an invisible weight pressing down on the restaurant, unwanted, unwelcome. Yet, he gathered his courage and stepped toward the counter. With every step he took, the tension thickened. Something was about to happen. Something no one in that luxury restaurant would forget. He swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and approached the head waitress. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tired but polite. "Can I get a small meal? I don't have much, but I can pay something." Jenna froze, her eyes flicking over his appearance. Then her lip curled into a smirk. "Before we go further, what would you do in this situation as the head waitress? Comment below, because what happens next will shock you." Jenna barely looked up. Her lips curled into an amused smirk as she scanned his appearance, the dirt-streaked clothes, the unkempt beard, and the trembling hands. She let out a dramatic sigh, loud enough for the nearby customers to hear. "Sir," she said, her voice thick with condescension, "this is not the kind of place that serves people like you." A snicker came from a well-dressed couple seated nearby. A man in a tailored navy suit whispered something to his date, and she giggled behind her hand. The homeless man tightened his fists. "Please," he said again, his voice quieter now. "I'll take anything, even a small coffee. I haven't eaten in..." Jenna cut him off. "Sir, I already said no." The man felt his stomach tighten. He knew this feeling so well, the sting of rejection, the burn of humiliation. His hands twitched at his sides. "I can pay," he repeated, his voice cracking. Jenna rolled her eyes and sighed dramatically. "How? With pocket change?" she said, mocking him. "Or are you planning to wash dishes in the back?" The luxury restaurant burst into laughter. The manager, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, overheard the commotion and strode toward the counter. His sharp eyes raked over the homeless man with disgust. "What's going on here?" he asked. Jenna gestured toward the homeless man, her voice dripping with amusement. "Oh, nothing much. Just someone who seems to have mistaken us for a soup kitchen." More laughter rippled through the room. The homeless man's face burned. But still, he didn't leave. His stomach twisted with hunger. He felt lightheaded and weak. "Please," he whispered again, his pride crumbling. "I just need something small." That was when the manager snapped. He slammed his palm against the counter, making the cups rattle. "Enough!" The restaurant fell into stunned silence. "I don't know how you got in here, but I want you out, now!" Tension took over the atmosphere, pressing down like a heavy blanket. A wave of humiliation washed over the homeless man, tightening around his throat as if a vice were slowly closing in. He had faced rejection before. Being kicked out of establishments was an unfortunate part of his existence, but this moment felt particularly agonizing. With a trembling nod, he lowered his head, feeling the world's weight on his shoulders. As he shuffled toward the exit, a voice pierced through the stillness, small yet resolute. "Wait!" Instantly, the bustling luxury restaurant fell into an eerie silence again. Conversations halted abruptly, and curious glances shifted toward him, creating an invisible spotlight that made him feel even more vulnerable. The head waitress, perched behind the counter, leaned forward slightly, her lips curling into a mockingly sarcastic smile that dripped with disdain. And this is where everything took a turn. What happened next would forever be etched in the memories of everyone in that luxury restaurant. The lively restaurant fell silent as all eyes turned toward the source of a small yet piercing voice that broke through the hushed atmosphere, altering the course of the moment abruptly. Little did he know that his bold action would soon attract a life-changing reward. At a cozy table near the counter, the young boy of about 10 sat, his figure dwarfed by the oversized tray he clutched tightly in his tiny hands. The colorful array of food on the tray seemed almost daunting. His wide eyes, filled with determination and uncertainty, darted around the room. Meanwhile, his parents wore expressions of shock and concern, their brows furrowed as they watched their son prepare to make a choice that would resonate far beyond this ordinary day. The boy stood up, his eyes filled with determination. "That isn't fair. He just asked for food," he declared, his voice unwavering as it sliced through the tense atmosphere, tiny but resolute. His mother gasped, her hand instinctively grasping his arm as if to pull him back into silence. "Sit down. Don't get involved," she urged in a hushed, urgent tone, glancing around nervously. But the boy, fueled by a sense of empathy, ignored her plea, standing firm in defiance. He picked up his tray, still steaming with fresh food, and walked purposefully toward the homeless man. With a gentle smile, he placed the tray on the vacant table that was a few steps away from the exit. "Here, you can have mine," he said, his voice filled with warmth and kindness. "Would you have the courage to act like this? Share your thoughts in the comments." The boy's hands trembled as he placed the tray on the table, his tear-filled eyes locked onto the homeless man as if trying to will him to take it. The homeless man remained still. Someone saw him. Someone cared. That's all that mattered to him at the time. Then, the moment shattered like glass underfoot. You've got to be kidding me! A furious voice sliced through the air, sharp and accusatory. The manager stormed toward them, his expression a twisted mix of disbelief and rage. His face flushed crimson with anger as his heavy footsteps echoed against the polished marble floor, each step resonating with barely contained fury. Noah flinched at the approaching storm, but he stood his ground, refusing to back down. Beside him was his mother, who had come to where he was to shield him. "Please, sir," Noah's mom implored, her voice trembling but urgent as she placed a calming hand on her son's shoulder. "He's just a child. He doesn't understand." "Oh, he understands perfectly well," the manager growled, his piercing gaze locking onto Noah with an intensity that made the air heavy. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead glinted off his bald head as he pointed at the tray. "That food is not going to him. We don't serve beggars here." The words struck her like a slap across the face, reverberating in the charged atmosphere of the diner. She inhaled sharply as she darted anxious glances between her son and the frail, homeless man. "Please," she implored once more, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, brimming with a mixture of hope and desperation. "He's just a hungry man. My son is only trying to show kindness. Isn't there any way?" She gestured toward the man, her voice dropping to a tender whisper that seemed to fracture under the weight of her emotions. "No," the manager replied sharply, his voice as cold and unyielding as steel. His jaw tightened with frustration as he crossed his arms defiantly over his chest, creating a wall of indifference. "I don't care how sweet this little act of charity looks. This is not a place for charity cases," he continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. Noah's lip quivered, a subtle sign of his rising fear, and his small hands trembled even more, yet he stood resolutely in place. His mother took a step forward, desperation lacing her every word as she tried once more to intervene. "He's just a boy," she murmured again, her voice thick with emotion and barely above a whisper. "And that man is someone's son too." For the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in the manager's steely gaze as he straightened his uniform with a dismissive huff, expelling air sharply through his nose. "I'm done with this," he snapped, his tone icy and unyielding. "The kid can eat here, the beggar can't." With that, he snatched Noah's tray. Noah's breath caught in his throat, and he stared at his shaky hands, feeling the sting of kindness stolen away in an instant. The homeless man, his shoulders slumped and head bowed, felt the oppressive weight of humiliation settling heavily upon him like an unwanted shroud. Noah's tears streamed down his cheeks, glistening like tiny diamonds against his flushed skin, as he clenched his fists tightly at his sides. His mother, feeling her heartache rise, pressed her fingers to her lips, desperately trying to stifle the wave of emotions threatening to overflow. The manager, with a cold glare, turned to face the homeless man, his voice sharp and commanding. "Get out!" The homeless man flinched at the harshness of the words, taking a hesitant step back. His frail body trembled, and the tension in his shoulders was palpable. He let out a long, heavy sigh. His eyes, once filled with a flicker of hope, now reflected a profound weariness. For the first time since he had stepped through the door, his voice shifted, trembling with emotion. "I hoped it would not come to this," he whispered, barely audible yet laden with unresolved tension. In that instant, the atmosphere around them thickened, and everything changed. Please click the share button to spread this heartfelt stand-up moment with your friends. Noah stood there, hands hung limply at his sides. Tears shimmered on his lashes, reflecting the dim light, while his tiny chest heaved in a rhythm as unsteady as a fragile bird's fluttering wings. Before him, the homeless man stood motionless, his head bowed low and his arms clenched tightly around himself. The weight of humiliation clung to him like a heavy shroud, one he had borne many times before. Yet this time was different. Noah had reached out, had offered a glimpse of kindness, and now, with that single painful moment, the sting of heartbreak felt more unbearable than ever. The manager spun around, his face aflame with rage, his patience finally unraveling like a thread pulled too tight. "I've had enough of this nonsense," he thundered, his voice reverberating through the cafe like a clap of thunder. The staff recoiled at the raw fury in his tone, while the customers held their breaths, caught in a moment of suspended anxiety. His piercing gaze zeroed in on a nearby employee, a security guard who stood rigidly near the kitchen entrance, eyes darting for guidance. "Get him out of here! Now!" he barked, the authority in his voice leaving no room for hesitation. The security guard hesitated, his fingers twitching nervously at his side as if grappling with the gravity of the situation and unsure of his next move. "What are you waiting for?" the manager barked. "I said throw him out!" A wave of discomfort rippled through the luxury restaurant. People shifted uneasily in their seats. Some looked away. Others watched with morbid curiosity, as if this were some kind of entertainment. The security guard finally moved. He moved toward the homeless man, his boots clicking against the polished floor, his towering frame casting a shadow over him. The homeless man inhaled deeply, his breath shaky. He was used to this. He had been shoved aside before. He had been made to feel like he didn't belong. But before the guard could lay a hand on him, something happened. The homeless man sighed, deeply, as if carrying the weight of a secret. Then very slowly, he straightened his spine. The first sign of a shift rippled through the luxury restaurant as a frown settled onto the manager's face, his brow furrowing in confusion. For the first time, the homeless man kept his head raised, revealing a face that had once been haunted, but now bore an unexpected intensity. His eyes sparkled with unusual clarity, sharp and powerful. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached into his pocket. A tense hush enveloped the restaurant, the air thick with anticipation as patrons leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. The security guard froze mid-step, his confidence wavering in the face of the unfolding moment. Amidst this charged silence, the manager let out a mocking laugh. "What?" he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Are you going to pull out a handful of coins and beg harder?" The homeless man didn't answer. His hand emerged from his pocket, gripping something sleek, black, and expensive. A smartphone. And in that moment, everything shifted. He dialed a number and said a few words only. Not long after the call, the luxury restaurant doors burst open. A team of men in black suits stormed inside. The manager's smirk faded instantly. The security guard took a step back, eyes wide. A hush fell over the crowd as customers gasped, their eyes darting between the disheveled figure of the homeless man and the sharply dressed men who hurried in. The air was thick with tension. One of the men, a leader among the group, caught sight of the homeless man, his face draining of color as realization struck him. "Sir, we're at your service," he exclaimed, his voice a mix of shock and urgency. Eyebrows shot up in astonishment, and a wave of whispered questions rippled through the crowd. The lingering mystery in the air was palpable as everyone thought, did the manager anticipate this unexpected turn of events? The moment of realization dawned like a storm cloud rolling in. The homeless man tilted his head slightly, shaking off the dust that clung to his sleeve like a stubborn memory. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace, he reached up, grasped his hood, and pulled it down. Instantly, the luxury restaurant erupted into a cacophony of chaos. The manager's face drained of color, turning ghostly white in an expression of sheer disbelief. He couldn't believe what he just saw. A woman's piercing scream sliced through the air, while a man's coffee cup slipped from his hands, shattering on the floor in a cascade of ceramic shards. It was none other than Chris Hemsworth. Time itself seemed to hold its breath as the entire restaurant froze in shock. In that electric moment, every single person in the luxury restaurant grasped the magnitude of their error. They had unwittingly overlooked the presence of a Hollywood icon, and the weight of that realization hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. Some of the patrons couldn't help expressing their regrets. They had fallen victim to judging a book by its cover. Noah's jaw dropped in sheer disbelief, his eyes wide as saucers. Did he just stand up for the legendary Thor, the thunder god himself? Of course. It was so unbelievable. It struck him like a lightning bolt. Superheroes were meant to spring into bold action, just as he had done for the mighty warrior standing before him. He felt a rush of exhilaration coursing through his veins as he embraced the gravity of the moment. So, is this really a way to treat people? Chris questioned, a glint of mischief in his eye as he brushed the remaining dust from his sleeve, the motion almost theatrical. He offered a wry smile that seemed to dance on his lips. The manager stood frozen, eyes wide in disbelief, struggling to process the scene that had just transpired before him. He had the gut feeling that he had gotten himself into a big mess, one that could cost him his job. Chris turned to the young boy and thanked him for standing up for what was right. He went on to compliment Noah's courage and kindness, the attributes that stunned Chris. Then he paid for Noah's meal and that of Noah's parents. Chris did not hesitate to put a call across to the owner of the luxury restaurant, reporting the treatment he got from the manager. The entire luxury restaurant was in shock. The same man they had mocked, humiliated, and ordered out was not just anyone. He was someone powerful, someone who had been watching, testing, waiting to see the true nature of those around him. Chris turned to Noah again, his smile and sharp expression softening. In a room full of people who had looked away, laughed, or judged, it was a child, a boy with nothing to gain who had chosen kindness. This was Noah's life-changing moment. He deserved it. Chris knelt to Noah's level, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "The world needs more people like you," he said, his voice carrying something deeper than gratitude, respect. He invited the boy and his family to a private movie set tour as a reward for his kindness. Noah sniffled, his small hands wiping at the last of his tears as words refused to leave his heavy lips. It was a lot to take in. Chris stood tall again, his eyes sweeping over the stunned crowd. The manager had nothing left to say. He looked down. His own arrogance was now a burden too heavy to carry. As Chris walked toward the doors, he gestured for Noah and his family to follow. "Come on, kid," he said with a smirk. "Let's get you on a real Heroes set." And as they stepped outside, Noah smiled for the first time that day. Because in a world that often values power over kindness, he had proven that kindness is the greatest power of all. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and check out our next video. Thank you.